The great hall of the Frost Moon Pack was a riot of noise and motion, a place where Phoebe always felt like a ghost. She pressed her back against the cold stone wall, trying to make herself as small and invisible as possible. The summer feast was in full swing, the air thick with the smell of roasted meat, sweet berries, and the musky scent of too many wolves in one place. All around her, members of her pack were laughing, boasting, and wrestling. It was a display of strength and spirit, a celebration of what it meant to be a werewolf. But to Phoebe, it was a special kind of torture. She watched as two young males, their chests puffed out, challenged each other to an arm wrestling match, their growls echoing off the high ceiling. A group of she-wolves nearby were giggling, their eyes flicking toward the strongest warriors, making bets on who would win the upcoming strength games. Phoebe's own parents had already given her a hopeful, slightly worried look from across the room, a silent question in their eyes. Why aren't you joining in? Why aren't you trying to find a mate? A deep, heavy sigh escaped her lips. That was the whole point of the feast, wasn't it? To pair up. To find your place in the pack order. To be loud and fierce and everything Phoebe was not. She didn't want to fight for status. She didn't care about being the strongest or the fastest. She dreamed of quiet things. She loved the silence of the deep woods, the way the moonlight painted the forest floor silver, the gentle rustle of leaves that spoke a language far softer than the constant growls and shouts of the pack. The noise was starting to press in on her, making her skin feel too tight. The clatter of plates, the booming laughter, the sharp crack of a bone being broken for its marrow, it was all too much. Her heart began to beat a little faster, a frantic flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with excitement and everything to do with the desperate need to escape. This was the same feeling she got every time, a cagey, trapped sensation that made her want to run and run until her lungs burned and the only sound was her own paws hitting the earth. She pushed herself off the wall, her movements slow and deliberate, trying not to draw any attention. She weaved through the crowd, offering small, tight smiles to those who glanced her way, but never stopping. Her destination was the large, arched doorway that led out into the blessedly cool and dark night. Every step away from the center of the feast felt like a weight being lifted from her shoulders. The humid, food-scented air began to thin, replaced by the crisp, clean fragrance of pine and night-blooming flowers. She was almost there. Her hand reached out, already feeling the chill of the night air on her fingertips. She could see the outlines of the tall, dark trees, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, calling to her. In just a few more seconds she would be free. She would be able to breathe. She could slip into the shadows, find her favorite spot by the babbling creek, and just be herself, with no one to watch her, no one to judge her for being different. She took one final determined step across the threshold, the grass soft under her thin shoes. A wave of relief washed over her. She had made it. Leaving so soon, Phoebe? The voice was deep and calm, like smooth stones at the bottom of a river. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the distant noise of the feast with startling clarity. It was a voice she had never heard before, and yet, it seemed to resonate right in the center of her chest, making her freeze mid-step. Her heart, which had just begun to calm down, gave a single hard thump. Slowly, very slowly she turned around. Leaning against the trunk of a massive oak tree, just outside the circle of light from the hall, was a man. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his arms crossed over his chest. He wasn't dressed in the familiar gray and white of the Frost Moon Pack. His clothes were dark and simple, but there was an air about him, a stillness that felt more powerful than all the noisy posturing inside. The moonlight caught the sharp line of his jaw and the curious glint in his eyes as he watched her. He had been waiting. And he knew her name. For a long moment, Phoebe could only stare, her mind scrambling like a startled rabbit. The voice, the unexpected presence, the fact that he knew her name, it all swirled together into a single sharp feeling of alarm. Her first instinct was to run, to melt into the forest she knew so well and leave this stranger behind. But something in his posture, the easy way he leaned against the tree, held her in place. He wasn't threatening her. He was just watching. "Who are you?" she finally managed to ask, her own voice sounding small and thin compared to his. "How do you know my name?" A slow, easy smile touched his lips, and it softened the sharp lines of his face. "My name is Griffin," he said, his tone still that same low, calm rumble. "And I saw you. From across the room." He uncrossed his arms and took a single, casual step forward, just enough to step out of the deepest shadow. "You looked like you were standing in the middle of a storm, willing it to pass you by. I know the feeling." Phoebe's wariness didn't vanish, but it shifted, mixed with a powerful and sudden curiosity. No one had ever described it like that before. No one had ever seemed to understand. "It's loud in there," she said simply, a weak explanation for the turmoil she always felt. "That's one word for it," Griffin agreed, his smile lingering. He gestured vaguely toward the noisy hall. "All that roaring and chest thumping. It gets a little repetitive, don't you think? I prefer a different kind of conversation." He wasn't like any of the males in her pack. They spoke in challenges and boasts. Griffin's words were like a quiet invitation. He wasn't trying to prove anything to her. He was just talking. "What kind of conversation is that?" Phoebe asked, her own body relaxing slightly, drawn in by his unusual calm. He looked up, through the canopy of leaves at the star-dusted sky. "The kind you can actually hear yourself think during. The kind about which constellation is the brightest tonight. Or where the best sun-warmed rocks are for napping by the river. Or why the air smells like rain even when the sky is clear." A genuine, surprised breath of laughter escaped Phoebe. Those were her thoughts. Those were the quiet wonders that filled her mind while everyone else was focused on dominance and games. "The wolfsbane flowers are blooming deeper in the woods," she found herself saying without thinking. "Their scent carries on the damp earth. That's the rain you smell." Griffin's eyes, which had been on the sky, slid back to her, and his gaze was intense, appreciative. "See? That's a real conversation." And so they talked. The minutes stretched, turning into what felt like a small, peaceful eternity. The distant feast became nothing more than a muffled hum, a world away. Phoebe told him about the hidden clearing where the fireflies danced in the summer, and he listened as if it were the most important story he'd ever heard. He asked her what she dreamed of, and for the first time she admitted out loud that she dreamed of peace, of a quiet life where she didn't have to pretend to be fierce. In return he spoke of traveling, of seeing different packs and different forests. He was careful with his words, never saying where he was from or why he was really here, but he spoke of the world with a wisdom that felt old and deep. He talked about the weight of responsibility, the loneliness of making hard choices, and the search for something true in a world full of posturing and false smiles. He never once looked at her with pity or confusion for her quiet nature. He looked at her as if she were the only interesting person in the entire territory. Meanwhile, the world inside the hall continued to spin without them. The Pack Alpha made an announcement, his voice booming even from a distance. Preparations were to be made, he said. The great Alpha of the Nightfang Pack, a young but famously powerful leader named Griffin, was due to arrive for a formal visit in a matter of weeks. A ripple of excitement and nervous energy pulsed from the feast. This was a big deal. Alliances, strength, the future of the pack, it all hinged on this visit. Young warriors were already straightening their backs, imagining impressing the legendary Alpha. She-wolves were gossiping, wondering what he would be like. Phoebe heard the news, but it felt distant, like a story from a book. The mighty Alpha Griffin felt like a character, a myth. The real person, the one standing right in front of her in the moonlight, was just Griffin. Her Griffin. The one who understood the scent of wolfsbane and the desire for a quiet corner of the world. He was a secret she was keeping from the frantic energy of her pack, and he felt more real, more solid, than anything happening inside those noisy stone walls. As they stood in the dark, sharing a world that was entirely their own, the idea of the visiting Alpha felt less important than the way Griffin was looking at her right now, as if she were the only star in his sky. The secret meetings became the rhythm of Phoebe's life, the steady, joyful heartbeat beneath the dull drum of her daily pack duties. In the weeks that followed the summer feast, whenever she could slip away, she would find Griffin waiting for her at the edge of the woods, his dark eyes lighting up at the sight of her in a way that made her stomach flutter. They never went to the noisy gathering places of the pack. Their world was the quiet, hidden parts of the forest. They walked along the bank of the babbling creek she loved, the one that glittered like a trail of scattered diamonds in the sunlight. They sat on the sun-warmed rocks she had told him about, their silence as comfortable as their conversations. He brought her small, perfect wildflowers, and she showed him the den of a fox family she had been quietly observing for months. With every meeting, the connection between them deepened, shifting from a surprising friendship into something richer, something warmer and more thrilling. The air around them seemed to change, charged with a new kind of energy. A casual brush of his hand against hers as he helped her over a fallen log sent a jolt up her arm that lingered long after. When their shoulders touched as they sat side by side, a comfortable heat spread through her, making her intensely aware of his nearness. His gaze, which had always been interested, now held a new intensity, a warm, smoldering look that made her breath catch. It was a feeling of belonging, of being truly seen and desired, that was entirely new and intoxicating. One evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Griffin led her to a new spot, a small, secluded meadow filled with soft, sweet-smelling clover, hidden from the world by a ring of ancient willow trees. He had brought a simple blanket and a small basket of berries and nuts. It was a picnic, a gesture so thoughtful and unlike the grand, competitive feasts of the pack that it made Phoebe's heart ache with a sudden, fierce joy. They talked and laughed as the stars began to pepper the darkening sky, their voices the only sound in their private, perfect world. As the night deepened, a comfortable silence fell between them. They were sitting close on the blanket, the heat from his body a welcome warmth against the cool night air. Phoebe was telling a story about trying to teach a young, clumsy wolf pup how to howl, and Griffin was laughing, a rich, genuine sound that she felt she could live inside. Her hand was resting on the blanket between them, and without a word, Griffin reached over and covered it with his own. His hand was large and warm, his fingers gently curling around hers. The contact was electric. A shiver, not of cold but of pure, thrilling sensation raced up her spine. Her words trailed off, and all she could do was look at their joined hands, then up into his face. The playful light in his eyes was gone, replaced by a deep, burning seriousness. The air between them grew thick and warm, humming with an unspoken tension. "Phoebe," he said, his voice low and husky, the sound vibrating through her. "These weeks with you, they're the most real thing I've ever known." Her heart was hammering against her ribs, a wild, hopeful rhythm. The feeling was so strong, so overwhelming, it demanded to be let out. She took a shaky breath, her courage gathering. "Griffin, I need to tell you something." She looked down at their joined hands, then forced her gaze back to his. "I have these feelings. When I'm with you, they're so strong. It's like my whole world has gotten brighter since I met you. I think I'm falling for you." For a moment, he was perfectly still, his eyes searching hers as if looking for the truth of the universe within them. Then, a look of profound, almost pained relief washed over his handsome features. His grip on her hand tightened almost imperceptibly. "Phoebe," he breathed, her name a prayer on his lips. He leaned closer, the space between them vanishing. "My feelings for you are a storm compared to your gentle rain. They are stronger than you can possibly imagine." His free hand came up to gently cup her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin in a caress that was so tender it made her want to cry. "You are everything I've been searching for. Everything." He was so close now she could feel his warm breath on her face, could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. The world had shrunk to this moment, to this small meadow, to the two of them. The secret he carried was a shadow at the edge of this brilliant, perfect light, and she saw it flicker in his gaze. He opened his mouth as if to speak, to tell her everything. But then he closed it again, a silent war in his eyes. He couldn't, not yet. He wouldn't risk shattering this. Instead of speaking, he leaned in the rest of the way and his lips met hers. It was not a gentle, hesitant kiss. It was a confession. It was a promise. It was full of all the longing and loneliness and fierce, sudden hope that had been building between them for weeks. It was spicy and warm and pure all at once, a claiming and a surrender. Phoebe melted into it, her hands coming up to clutch his shoulders, holding on as the world tilted. In that kiss, under the blanket of 1,000 stars, nothing else existed. There was no pack, no duty, no hidden identity. There was only Griffin and Phoebe, and the undeniable, breathtaking truth that they had found their way home to each other. The morning of the Alpha's visit dawned bright and clear, but a heavy, nervous energy had settled over the Frost Moon Pack territory. It buzzed in the air, a stark contrast to the peaceful stillness Phoebe had cherished in her secret meetings. Today there was no escaping the frenzy. The entire pack was summoned to the main clearing, a wide, grassy field used for ceremonies and important announcements. Everyone, from the oldest elders to the smallest pups, was expected to be there, looking their best, standing tall and proud to represent their home. Phoebe stood at the very back of the gathered crowd, her mother having fussed over her hair and clothes for an hour before finally leaving her side. She felt like a statue, stiff and uncomfortable in her formal tunic. Her mind, however, was far away, lost in the memory of Griffin's kiss, in the warmth of his hand and the low husky sound of his voice telling her she was everything. She scanned the tree line, half hoping, half dreading to see him appear for one of their stolen moments. He had been strangely quiet the last 2 days, and a tiny, cold knot of worry had begun to form in her stomach. She told herself he was just busy, a traveler with his own life, but the silence felt ominous. A hush, sudden and absolute, fell over the crowd. The Frost Moon Pack Alpha, a large, grizzled man named Boren, stepped onto the raised wooden platform at the front of the clearing. His face was a mask of solemn importance. "Packmates," his voice boomed, carrying easily in the tense silence. "Today we welcome greatness. Today we host Alpha Griffin of the Nightfang Pack." A ripple of awe and excitement went through the crowd. People stood on their toes, craning their necks to see the procession that was now emerging from the forest path on the other side of the clearing. Phoebe, from her position in the back, could only see a group of large, impressively built warriors walking in a tight, protective formation. They moved with a unison and power that spoke of immense discipline and strength. Her Frost Moon packmates murmured to each other, impressed and intimidated. The group of warriors reached the platform and parted, creating a path. And then the man himself stepped through. Time stopped. The air vanished from Phoebe's lungs. The world tilted on its axis, the colors and sounds blurring into a meaningless swirl. Because the man walking with effortless authority onto the platform, the man dressed in the dark, luxurious furs of an alpha, with a silver circlet resting on his brow and an aura of absolute command radiating from him, was Griffin. Her Griffin. The man who had laughed with her by the creek. The man whose hand had held hers. The man whose lips had claimed hers under the starlight. It was him. Every line of his face, every angle of his body, was achingly, terrifyingly familiar. But the easy smile was gone, replaced by a cool, composed expression of power. The warm, intimate light in his eyes was now a sharp, assessing gaze that swept over the entire pack, missing nothing. This was not her gentle, understanding companion. This was Alpha Griffin, a legend, a king among wolves. A cold, sharp pain, like a shard of ice, pierced Phoebe's heart. It was followed by a hot wave of humiliation and betrayal that burned her cheeks. It had all been a lie. Every conversation, every shared secret, every tender look, it had all been a game to him. A way for a powerful alpha to amuse himself, to slum it with a quiet, insignificant she-wolf from a lesser pack. She felt dizzy, her knees threatening to buckle. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the earth and never come out. Up on the platform, Alpha Boren was giving a formal welcome speech, but Phoebe didn't hear a word. Her entire being was focused on Griffin, on the devastating truth of his identity. His gaze continued its slow sweep of the crowd, and then, as if pulled by an invisible string, it found hers. For a single, suspended moment, his alpha mask slipped. His eyes widened just a fraction, and in their depths she saw a flash of something: panic, regret, a desperate plea. It lasted only a heartbeat before his expression smoothed over again into regal composure, but she had seen it. It was the look of a man who had been caught. The formality seemed to last forever. Phoebe stood frozen, a statue of heartbreak, until the official welcome was over and the crowd was dismissed to prepare for the evening's feast. As people began to mill about, talking excitedly, she turned on her heel, blind to everything, and stumbled toward the woods, needing the sanctuary of the trees. She didn't get far. "Phoebe." He was there. He had moved with a speed that shouldn't have been possible, intercepting her path just inside the forest's edge. He had shed his ceremonial circlet, but he was still the alpha, his power a tangible force that pressed against her. "Don't," she choked out, wrapping her arms around herself, unable to look at him. "Don't say my name. Was it all a joke to you? Was I just entertainment?" "No." The word was sharp, fierce, filled with a raw emotion that made her flinch. "Phoebe, look at me. Please." When she didn't, he stepped closer, his voice dropping, losing its alpha boom and becoming the voice she remembered, the one that had spoken to her in the moonlight. It was strained, full of a pain that mirrored her own. "I disguised myself because I was tired. I am surrounded by wolves who only see this," he gestured to his alpha furs, "who only want power, who only want to be the mate of an alpha for the status it brings. I was lonely, Phoebe. So deeply, profoundly lonely." He took another step, his gaze begging her to understand. "I came here to find a mate who would see the man, not the title. And I found you. I fell in love with Phoebe, the brave and kind she-wolf who slips away from feasts to watch fireflies. The one who knows the scent of wolfsbane and dreams of peace. Not with a title. My heart chose you before my wolf even knew you were my true mate. The lie was my burden, but my feelings for you are the truest thing I have ever known." The words washed over her, a torrent of confession that both shattered and rebuilt her world in the same instant. The lie was a betrayal, a deep and painful wound. But the love he was describing, that felt real. It felt like the same love she had been feeling for him. She finally lifted her eyes to his, and she saw the truth of his loneliness, the sincerity of his torment, shining in his familiar, beautiful face. The mighty Alpha was gone, and standing before her was just Griffin, the man from the meadow, his heart in his hands, waiting for her to either break it or take it. The foundation of her world had cracked, and she was left standing in the ruins, staring at the complicated, painful, undeniable truth. The silence that stretched between them in the shadow of the trees was heavier than any noise from the feast, thick with hurt and confusion and the shattered pieces of Phoebe's trust. Griffin's confession hung in the air, a fragile bridge over a chasm of betrayal. She could see the raw honesty in his eyes, the fear of losing her warring with the weight of his deception. He had lied. The man she had given her heart to was built on a foundation of half-truths. But the loneliness he spoke of, the desperate search for something real, that she understood in the very core of her soul. It was her own story. She turned away from him, not in rejection, but because she could no longer think while looking at his face, the face she had come to love. She walked a few paces, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, feeling the chill of the truth seeping into her bones. The memory of their first meeting replayed in her mind. Him leaning against the tree, a stranger who saw her. Their walks, their talks, the way he listened as if her words were precious. The picnic. The kiss. Every moment had been real. The connection that had sparked between them, the feeling of finally being seen and understood, that hadn't been part of his disguise. That had been the man breaking through the title. He didn't follow her. He gave her the space she needed, standing still and silent, his own fate hanging in the balance. It was this, perhaps more than anything else, that began to mend the fracture in her heart. The powerful Alpha who could command an entire pack, was powerless now, waiting for her judgment. Phoebe thought about her own life, about the constant pressure to be someone she wasn't, to want things she didn't want. She had been hiding too in her own way. She had been slipping away from feasts her whole life, hiding her true quiet nature from a world that valued only strength and noise. Griffin had hidden his title from a world that valued only power. They were two halves of the same lonely coin. She took a deep, shuddering breath, the scent of pine and damp earth filling her lungs, grounding her. She turned around slowly to face him. His shoulders were tense, his hands clenched at his sides, his gaze fixed on her with a desperate hope that was almost painful to see. "The man who talked with me under the stars," she began, her voice quiet but clear, cutting through the tense silence. "The one who knew the value of a quiet moment, was that the Alpha? Or was that you?" "It was me," he said, the words rushing out, fervent and sure. "That has always been me, Phoebe. The Alpha is a duty, a role I was born to. But the man who loves you, that is who I am." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of release, of understanding, of a love that had been tested and had not broken. She walked toward him, each step a decision, a choice, a forgiveness. "I don't care if you're an Alpha or a traveler," she said, stopping just before him. "I fell in love with the man. And I love him still." The relief that washed over Griffin's face was like the sun breaking through a storm. It transformed him, softening the hard lines of worry and fear. He reached for her hands, his own trembling slightly as he laced his fingers with hers. "You are my true mate, Phoebe. My heart knew it from the first moment I saw you trying to escape that feast." He led her back to the clearing, where the pack was still mingling in a nervous, excited buzz. All eyes turned to them as they approached the central platform. Griffin did not let go of her hand. He stepped up, pulling her gently up beside him, and faced the crowd of Frost Moon wolves and his own watching warriors. "People of the Frost Moon Pack," he announced, his Alpha voice ringing out, clear and powerful, but now filled with a warmth that had not been there before. "I came here seeking an alliance. But I have found far more." He turned his gaze to Phoebe, his expression so full of love and pride that it stole her breath away. "I have found my Luna. My true mate. Her name is Phoebe." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a stunned silence and then, slowly, a rising wave of cheers and applause. Her parents looked shocked, then overjoyed. The pack saw her, their quiet, overlooked member, standing beside the most powerful Alpha they knew, not as a subordinate but as an equal. His equal. In the days and weeks that followed, a new peace settled over Phoebe, a peace that came from no longer having to hide any part of herself. Griffin, the mighty Alpha, was still a strong and decisive leader, but with Phoebe by his side, he was also the man from the meadow, softer, happier, complete. Their love story became a legend, not because of his power or her unexpected rise, but because it was a reminder that the deepest bonds are formed not by titles or strength, but by seeing and loving the true person hiding within. Their story is one of many, a tale of secrets, of moonlight confessions, and of a love so strong it forgave a lie to embrace a greater truth. The forest holds countless more secrets, and the packs have many more tales waiting to be told. If you want to be there for the next adventure, to discover more hidden loves and thrilling destinies under the full moon, make sure to subscribe. A new story is always just a howl away.